everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Rishi Bedi and I lead InMobi in Southeast Asia, Japan, and Korea markets. We have a very interesting conversation lined up for you today. With market disruption dramatically shifting long conditioned behavior in just a matter of weeks, mobile has emerged as the anchor that helped individuals stay connected in a new reality. Today, I have with me David Porter from Unilever, and we will be discussing how brands should equip themselves for this radical change in behavior. Hi, David. How are you doing?
I'm well, and hi, Richie, and thanks very much for having me on.
Thank you. We're delighted to have you with us, David, today. David, I have, of course, a few questions for you. The first question is around the consumer behavior that has rapidly shifted in the last few months. It has led to a lot of uncertainty in the CMO's office. The consumer's point of sales have shifted. They're no longer where they used to be. And marketers have had to really re-strategize their strategies in the last 1 year. We wanted to understand from you, what are some new normal consumer trends that are here to stay?
So, there has been a lot of change. I wouldn't necessarily call it uncertainty, but I think this is well known. We've seen this massive acceleration of people's digital behaviors and a massive acceleration in brands' digital marketing efforts. And so things that we thought would take us maybe 4 or 5 years have happened in a matter of months. And it's going to be very interesting to see which of those habits stick and which slide back into old ways of life. Well, one thing, Richie, I found, and I'm sure you have as well, as you tour the region virtually, that this is not a level playing field across Southeast Asia. Things are happening very differently in different markets. That old saw that we keep on hearing now about same storm, different boats. So it's been wildly varied depending on the public health situation and depending on people's ingrained habits. But this has always been a strong part of the world for mobile. We've been mobile first as a marketing organization in Asia for many years now. So that wasn't a huge pivot for us. I think obviously some of these new habits get really interesting if we look at the extent to which e-commerce and e-medicine, e-learning has really come into play. I've seen all three at play in this room with my son working next to me. Visit your doctor online, and obviously we've all been working from home. And I think a lot of those habits are likely to stay with us. The other thing we've noticed a great deal, certainly here in Singapore, and I'm sure it's true in some other markets where there wasn't total lockdown, is personal fitness has become a major item. And I think that will continue. And of course, that tends to be very app-based these days. So the fitness, the personal fitness bully in the form of an app is here for all of us. I think healthy eating goes hand in glove with that as well. So many new habits in the food category, particularly as many of our markets have a strongly ingrained habit of eating away from home, and that's really shifted much more than it might say in the West. And then, of course, the hygiene habit. This is one that's very close to my heart and Unilever's heart, where we've been working really hard to, particularly on behalf of Lifebuoy, but across the category, to reinstill the habit of frequent, correct hand washing, because it's such an important part of avoiding the pandemic. And it's something that we feel our brand should really be doing. So that's been big. I think the other thing that's changed is the public's appetite, or not, for the kind of messages that some brands are used to putting out. And the need to be utterly authentic, especially in really difficult times, is greatly magnified compared to how it was a few years ago. Now, we've always believed in authenticity in the way we communicate, but now it's become more than kind of a little bit extra. It's become an absolute hygiene factor. Otherwise, the public turns off. So we're looking very hard these days at our purpose on the brands, and the way we break it down is between brand say, what we stand for, and brand do. And we think brand do, the actions that brands actually take rather than just talking about it, will become a bigger and bigger part of a brand's power, its equity, and bigger part of our messaging. And part of that authenticity, for us at least, is around unstereotyping. And you may be aware of the Unstereotype Alliance, which we kicked off with the WFA at Cannes a few years ago. And that's with something that we've really doubled down on. So we don't just want to have unstereotyped images from our brands on your screen, but we want the people behind the camera to also be reflective of the real world, and the people writing the briefs to be equally reflective. So that's gone from how you cast a commercial to a full-on diversity and inclusion program in the business. Long answer, short question.
No, those are some great insights, David. Thank you. I think you've given us good insights. A couple of things that stood out for me is, of course, e-commerce and e-learning. So the entire need for being connected with the consumers through the or digital means, and in that categorically, mobiles has gone up significantly. And there's no precedence to this, right? This is the first time the adoption of mobile and online services has shot up so high, so much more. I think there are studies that confirm that 20% of the digital consumers connected with a service for the first time. The adoption of, let's say, e-commerce apps and grocery apps, edutech, all of them has been year on year in the range of some 40 to 60%, depending on which market are we talking to. Now, in that, of course, the last year's pandemic or continued pandemic has played a very important role in pushing digital adoption transformation. I wanted to understand, with all of this going on, with government wanting to connect with consumers on mobile apps by tracing their location, e-commerce or grocery providers wanting to use mobile apps to deliver their daily essentials to consumers in their houses, education platforms doing the same, video or OTT platforms doing the same. I wanted to understand, what do you think is a brand's, what should be a brand's future strategy for building or connecting with the consumers through mobile apps, and how important it is in the scheme of things for this year?
Great question. And I think a few years ago, a lot of brands felt the way to deal with this growing space was to build their own app, period. And I've lost count of the millions that brands around the world have wasted thinking that's the only answer, and then not understanding why millions of subscribers didn't emerge. So I think it's not about necessarily having your own. A lot of those turned out to be vanity projects. It's just about navigating the app-based world and taking it as seriously as we do the open web and the walled gardens as well. So it's become a really important space to play in. I think more and more we're going to see some of the partners like yourselves and some of our DSPs able to operate programmatically across this space and across things like gaming and voice as well. And as these parts of the digital ecosystem get knitted into that way of doing business, I think there will be a really burgeoning area. So, there's still a lot of work to be done in certain areas. It has particular technical challenges, which you know far better than I do, to bring it into that sort of one reach curve. But it's going to be important. And I see programmatic as the way that we can make this less labor intensive and affordable and accountable. So I'm looking forward to doing more work in that space for sure.
Absolutely, David. One more follow-up question on the same point, David. Of course, we've seen in the last few years, as you mentioned, tons and tons of brands wanting to have their own app, having an app, and not necessarily seeing a huge growth or execution in terms of engagement or driving that brand purpose or the strategy going through the app. But of course, things changed last year and still are changing. How do brands who do not own an app today straddle this development?
As I said, I think there are plenty of other areas out there to navigate. I'd almost turn it around and say, if we're going to build apps these days, we're asking far more sensible questions of ourselves rather than just rushing off and doing it. For example, having a stronger online presence as a brand on your own, in your own territory, got a whole lot more important as the need to create our own first-party data became more important. And we've started to build the value of those data into our cost equation when we look at whether or not it's worth building a brand's own or a standalone app or whatever it may be. So you're right that the cost equation has certainly changed, and people are a lot more thoughtful about it. And that's probably the biggest single benefit for many packaged goods brands, is that if we're in that environment and in control of the data value exchange with the public, and are building healthy, useful relationships on both sides of that through first party, then it starts to get interesting. And I think that's why you've seen a lot of brands start to move towards being able to trade direct with the public online, for example. But whether that's through an app or through the open web, yeah, it's not something that keeps me awake at night, to be quite entirely honest.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. And I think we also seen a lot of development in the direct to consumer space across the region. And yeah, some of that is yet to be seen, and we will see as it unfolds. Is it web or is it app? But we definitely know that the first point of engagement, the awareness, the consideration definitely is appearing to be like more on the mobile side, and from there on the journey travels towards an MWeb platform or a web platform or an app platform. And where do we see real growth is, we would learn as we go this year. All right, David, we'll move on to the next question. So we've heard about digital marketing maturity in 2021, and that's the after effect of the pandemic. And we believe, because we look at the mobile growth, as we've discussed in the last few minutes, we believe that digital marketing maturity is in some ways for Southeast Asia or APAC region almost the same as mobile marketing maturity. So they're very overlapping and similar for us in this region, because we are mobile first, mobile dominant, most of the population, consumers here. In terms of that mobile marketing maturity, what do you think brand needs to build in terms of programmatic maturity, in terms of mobile video or leveraging video on mobile, in terms of consumer intelligence or solutions built around it? On these three vectors, what would you suggest for brands to invest their time and effort on?
So I think the first thing is that mobile first has to mean mobile first. And we actually have to walk the talk. So that took not very long to get into media planners' brains. It took us a little longer, I think, as an industry to really start thinking about how to build assets and creative work for the device rather than just editing work we'd done before. But I got so used, I think, to complaining about the lack of progress there that I probably didn't recognize enough just how much progress has been made in the last few years. And I think it's been terrific. So I think creatively, we're much closer to having assets that reflect the very different nature of the device that they're viewed on. So that's the first thing. The thing I'm always alert to in this space is the disruptors, because the change they can bring is so fundamental. And I'm thinking about two comparatively recent events. If we go back a couple of years to what Jio did in terms of turning Indian mobile experiences upside down, to the point where now Indians consume more mobile data than USA and China combined, I think. Certainly did just before the pandemic. That was a complete, absolute disruptor. And then we have, of course, other occasions more recently where perhaps there's an unintended consequence in the Philippines, where basically the nation pivoted to digital when one of the networks went off out. So those disruptors, when they come, really do change things incredibly quickly. And it's not always possible to predict what the unintended consequences of those things will be. But we need to keep across it. And I'm sure we're going to see a few more as we come out of the pandemic, with much more mobile-centric public and governments being aware of the opportunities that they now face them. I think the other challenge we've got in this world, where one has to be that much more authentic in the messaging, is the money that we used to spend building brand love or brand power now has to do a whole lot of other jobs as well, like drive purpose, both in say and do, like help us with our data acquisition that we just touched on slightly, and also to drive performance in e-commerce or bricks and mortar retail. So we're really having to, I think, ask ourselves how to make sure that the same money can cover all of that, with particular attention to the mobile world. The other sort of vector I'd want to bring into this, I think, is just health and safety, if you like. That, you know, we really need to keep pushing for a healthier, safer digital ecosystem. And I appreciate InMobi is a great supporter of this idea. But we know that bad actors love new platforms. So when we're living in this incredibly exciting moment when so much new stuff's happening, we also know that the bad actors are there at the same time or even before many of us. So although we've made great progress on viewability and other accountability, brand safety, this game's never over. And I think, you know, we really appreciate the industry coming together now through GARM, through the Global Alliance for Responsible Media, because this is the first time we've got the big platforms, the major agency groups, and the world's largest brands working together to make this happen. And I think last year was a year of getting organized, talking, trying to get this common vocabulary even across that whole piece so that we all agreed what safety was, what viewability was, etc. This year, I hope, will be the year of taking proper action and really being fully aligned on how we make the internet safer, more accountable, and better for the general public. And I would say that's most important for mobile, because this is the device that all too often parents will hand off to their children as a pacifier without necessarily understanding the experience that's then going to be had by that child. So I think particularly for brand safety, it's going to be a hot topic. And we've talked, of course, about diversity and inclusion earlier on. So I think for digital maturity, delivering a consumer experience on mobile that looks a whole lot more like the places where the viewer lives, and a whole lot less like the sort of stereotypical advertising world of yore. I think that's going to be a real step forward. I'm looking forward to seeing the benefits of that as well.
Sure. Absolutely. I think that point that you made about kids having access to this device, which was not the case with other devices like a PC or a laptop, it's a very important point. And health, safety of the brand, of privacy, security of data, I think all of that presents a very different opportunity as well as a challenge in order to think from a mobile first approach. It's not solution built for one screen or one device may not fit exactly well on mobile, and that's why investing more effort and time on mobile and building some of these capabilities very carefully is very, very important.
And Rishi, this, I'm not saying this is a bad thing. This is the price we pay for having a device which is so uniquely personal and intimate in the way that we use them as consumers. We keep our privacy is on there. The things we hold most dear are often on there, whether that's your family or your finances or whatever it may be. And if we're going to be welcomed into that space, I've always felt that mobile deserves or needs a slightly different level of thought and consideration about how we use that moment when we do actually get a member of the public's attention. But because it's so intimate, if you get it right, the rewards are immense. So it's a challenge worth facing up to, I think. Yeah. I mean, one of the things that's going to make it difficult, of course, is we're trying to do this in a continuing pandemic. And I think it's all too easy for many of us to forget that while that pandemic's raging, there's a global recession kind of bubbling away underneath it. So it's going to be a rocky couple of years. But I think in terms of where the public's got to, mobile's going to play a huge part in global recovery and how we communicate in future.
Last question from my side, David. We want to know a little bit more, if you're comfortable sharing, without going into too much detail. We want to know only what you can share comfortably. Is what has been Unilever's approach, either in terms of technology or otherwise, to build mobile marketing maturity? If you can share some anecdotal examples or some insights, I think that would be great and useful for all of us.
Yeah, so there's there's an area I can't really talk too much around things like, you know, how we work our production, supply chain, warehousing, and so forth. But you know, we're certainly taking digitization generally very seriously, and not just as a thing that's done in marketing. I mean, our Chief Digital and Marketing Officer, Connie Brahms, it's the "and" in her title is an important one. It's digital and marketing. So that they're seen as two things that sit side by side. So that distinction is fully recognized in the business. I think in terms of mobile and the media work we've done, it's just been more of the same, but doing it faster and really making sure that the creative product now keeps up with the technology that we've got available to us. And I think you will see a lot more in gaming coming through, particularly in the mainstream area. I'm really interested in gaming at the moment, and how you've got this incredibly organized esports system in the West in terms of teams, but incredibly popular esports from the East, particularly from Tencent in China. And then in the middle, when those two things converge, that's going to be huge. And we've also got a massive mainstream gaming that is barely recognized by marketers yet as being a huge opportunity with mass audiences. And of course, something that's quite special in Southeast Asia, which we're going to have to learn about here, is as we see e-commerce, the gradual sinification of Southeast Asian e-commerce as the Chinese platforms really build, and the gamification on the festival days that comes with that is a whole new space as well that you don't see on Western platforms, and therefore global brands based in the West don't have a huge amount of experience in. So I think that's going to be a hot learning area for us in mobile in the year ahead, because the next 11.11 will be very much an entertainment and gaming experience, I think, as it is these days in China. So that would be one of the big areas, I think, to watch.
Okay, fantastic. I think it's interesting that the way gaming has also shot up in the last 1 year, and enough and more reports now tell us how many women are on gaming in various countries. And the top 3 or 4 segments or audience segments on the gaming, these are not esports, but it's very encouraging to see how much higher share of both genders is now on mobile. There's a fair amount of good proportion, and I think 50 to 60% plus women now play gaming. Of course, these are casual games, but of course, it wasn't the case a few years ago, which is very encouraging.
Yeah, I agree. And so I do think brands will really start to step into that space. It's got a little bit of work to do in terms of organization, so that we know that we can talk to 3 or 4 operations in broadly similar ways, and then brands can learn how to really structure and manage their campaigns. But again, it comes back to programmatic and being able to do this at scale. That's going to attract many more brands than perhaps more niche brands which have traditionally been involved in esports. This is going to open it up. So looking forward to that, and it's going to be a great year ahead, full of challenges, everything being done twice as fast as it was the year before, but I think we're getting used to that, and it's part of the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, David. I'm going to try and give a 2-minute summary of our discussion, and it'll be great if you can add anything else after that. So in short, I think great insights. Southeast Asia and APAC are mobile first, and mobile first means mobile first. That means every strategy, every execution, every thought, every purpose should take mobile into consideration. These examples to do that are, think about assets, for example. Make sure assets derive the maximum value of the screen or platform that we are leveraging. So if you're thinking mobile, then your assets should be mobilized for distribution, for engagement on mobile. Another one is, of course, leveraging a lot of data for making sure that we are able to engage with the consumers that we want to build efficiencies. If there is e-commerce strategies around data, there is a lot of data on gaming. If you have a direct engagement, it doesn't matter, it's around the app or the web, but you start from data and of course engage with consumers with the thriving mobile app in assets or inventory available across the region. Another one is health and safety of the brand. So safety of not just the brand, but also the privacy. all of that comes with a lot of responsibility. If you've already got strategies and policies and some guidelines in the organization, revisit them and think how they are customized for a mobile first approach in the region. All in all, we are a mobile first region, and it's important for all of us to think and put mobile first when we are planning our marketing strategies this year. And the pandemic has actually elevated that need and responsibility much more. So that's in short. David, if anything else you would want to add to that, please do.
I think it's the classic, what he said. Fully agree. And I think, I find a bigger and bigger part of my role is to make sure that we are working with other brands in other parts of the world through the World Federation of Advertisers to make sure this whole safety and accountability piece is dealt with, because it is an industry issue. These aren't areas where you can win against your competitors. It's about working together. So I think that collaboration is going to be very important, and it's great to have partners like InMobi at GARM to make that happen. So fully agree. Looking forward to the year ahead and the year in mobile.
Thank you so much, David. It's always a pleasure to speak to you, and thank you for taking out time to join us today and share those brilliant insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you.